Good evening, everyone. It's so lovely to have you with us this evening. Thank you for joining us. We are having a fantastic program tonight. Very excited about it. We have the lovely Dr. Thulja Trikamjee that's joining us tonight. I'll introduce her a little bit later. And please, if you guys can remember to also post your questions throughout the session. So, because there will also be a lucky draw at the end. So that's always nice to get a nice hamper at the after our meeting. Tonight we'll be discussing a very important topic. The allergic connection. We are going to discuss whether eczema and asthma is related, and if so, how and why. And that's where Dr. Thulja comes in, and she's going to really elucidate that for us. And I'm looking forward to that. I always learn so much from her, and I'm looking forward to learning a lot tonight as well. And I'm obviously, I don't even have to say that I hope you learn something, because I'm sure that you are going to learn something. So who am I? I am Dr. Suretha Kannenberg. I'm a dermatologist in Cape Town, full-time at Tygerberg Hospital and Stellenbosch University. Small private practice, but and a particular interest in eczema and the whole process of eczema and the helping people to cope with eczema and also all the mental health aspects associated with eczema and how it affects the quality of life. So Dr. Thulja and I actually work really closely together because whereas I focus a lot on the skin, she also focuses on the skin as well as other type of allergies. And she is a pediatrician and an allergist, or we also call these doctors with this extra specialization, we call them also allergologists. And she's also a Allergy Foundation of South Africa's director. She has a passion for improving allergy care in South Africa. And we're both quite passionate people about that. And that she is going to be sharing her expertise on the link between eczema and asthma. So, Dr. Thulja, I'd like to welcome you to this evening's meeting. I'm going to call you Dr. Thulja, even though we speak regularly and I feel like we're almost family. But so it's lovely to have you here this evening. And we're going to move over to you very shortly. I just want to also thank our sponsor this evening, Dermastore, without who this meeting would not be possible. So thank you so much. And we're going to be seeing a lovely video on Dermastore and what they do and what they can offer a little bit later. So let's move on. Dr. Thulja, we are going to delve into your fantastic speciality. And you were going to, actually, there was a lecture that you gave last night that I had to miss because I unfortunately had other commitments. And that is the first thing that we will discuss this evening. So we often hear about this term atopic march. I must say, for a long time, I thought it was a controversial thing, but I would like for you to even tell me what I missed last night at the lecture, and what does it actually mean?
Thank you. Good evening to all of the viewers on all of our platforms. Thank you so much, Suretha. I do feel like Suretha and I are family because we chat all the time. And for all the patients who are listening, one of the reasons Suretha and I are so close is because we're both so passionate about these patients. And both of us have realized over a period of time that many of these patients benefit from having kind of a holistic care. You know, Suretha has expert insights that I don't understand related to the latest techniques on actually managing the skin. And that's what we're going to talk about today. What I bring in is how the skin as an organ can impact the rest of your body as well, and how sometimes that eczema or atopic dermatitis that we refer to can have kind of like a deeper underlying meaning connected to various other things. So, to answer your question, Suretha, the atopic march or allergic march essentially is, and I found a definition from the American Academy of Pediatrics, concepts, which I used in my presentation yesterday. Basically, it's this theory that patients with atopy or allergy, what we as doctors know as type 2 inflammation or IgE-mediated inflammation, generally follow a pathway or a trajectory over a period of time, literally from birth, that they would develop different types of allergic conditions. Atopic dermatitis or eczema is usually the start of that atopic march. So traditionally, it's you would get your atopic dermatitis. It could start, they say, from infancy, but sometimes it can literally start on day zero of life. So there isn't now even a body of research that looks at atopic dermatitis or dry skin on day zero of life, meaning that when you measure transepidermal water loss on an infant from birth, you can actually find that those kids who are more predisposed to or would get eczema later on have a higher transepidermal water loss. Now, the interesting thing about that, Suretha, is that opens up a whole can of worms on. We know if they already have dryness on day zero, does this mean that this atopic march could potentially start in utero from the time the baby is inside the mother's body? Because we know that allergies are genetic. So, yes, we say usually atopic dermatitis, but the family history plays a role in that. After that, when we're introducing foods into many of these patients' lives, and that's the period between 4 months, 6 months, up until the first and second year, those kids, if they have eczema or AD, I'm going to use the word AD when we talk about eczema or atopic dermatitis, but those kids are at a higher risk of food allergy, depending on their background, meaning family history of all the conditions, not just eczema, family history of food allergy, eczema, asthma, allergic rhinitis. They might have that higher incidence, and that's the second part of the atopic march. And that, depending on the patient, the risk is different. Some kids do get food allergy, some don't. But generally speaking, we want to manage that area properly. We want to manage that time frame properly because we now have information in terms of them having that risk. After that, your environmental allergies kick in. So when you become a child and you start going to creche and school, now you might get the snotties, blocked nose, congested nose. And then a lot of those kids who constantly say that, when I was a kid, my colds keep going down to my chest. I was told I was asthmatic, or the mummies who say that my child was admitted with bronchiolitis 3 times in a year. Every time it was winter, this child was that child who constantly needed hospitalization. This is now your upper airway, which is the nose, and now your lower airway. And essentially, by definition, that allergic march is skin, eczema, then food, which is our gut, then your upper airway, which is your allergic rhinitis, and then the end stage is your asthma or lower airway. What's so key there is that that can follow different pathways. So with some patients, they can get the chestiness first and then the nose. And with some people, they can grow out of it and it can come back later. But traditionally, we find that that eczema, asthma, allergic rhinitis can continue in a different pattern throughout life, throughout old age.
Yeah. I must say that what I always like to tell my patients is that these genes are like dimmer switches, that they are sometimes it'll be turned on completely. So your eczema will be turned on completely, and your hay fever will just be, in a kind of a very low light. And it's the same thing with the family members as well. So some members will have, eczema, all the way turned up all the way, and then some of them will have a little bit of hay fever or a lot of hay fever. So I like the dimmer switch kind of analogy.
You're
So,
100%
um,
correct. So, Sarita,
sorry.
if I can just comment on that, what you're saying is so important. And I think the patients need to know because very often, this is what we study, and we know that this happens over a period of time in many atopic patients. But why what you say is so key is often patients think if I don't follow that pattern, that means I'm not atopic. And
Mm,
so, what Dr. Kannenberg saying is so accurate because I would have sometimes a mom where one child has bad eczema, one child has just bad asthma. And often when I ask questions, a patient would think if we're dealing with eczema, the family history means it only might be eczema. And slowly, as you chat to the patient and you explain to them about recurrent infections, they would say, Actually, that makes sense. I did have that when I was a kid. So, important for our patients to know that it doesn't necessarily mean you would have that diagnosis or that label, but these are symptoms that you can present with, and one leads to an increased risk of another.
Hmm. And Thulja, you were saying the upper respiratory symptoms that also includes the blocked ears, eh? Those things that you need the grommets for and all of that. So it also includes that whole blocked up, everything blocked up business. Snotty, like you said. And also that it goes down to the chest. That just makes so much sense, actually. So tell me, what do you think about? So we've now obviously established that eczema and asthma is closely linked. But why is that? You've kind of touched on it a little bit. Maybe you can just elucidate that a little bit.
So, Sarita, when you said it was a bit controversial, you were 100% correct. There has been debate over decades on whether or not this is true. But what we look at is the data on the number of patients. And there's been various studies where essentially what they look at is if you have a child who has atopic dermatitis, so it would mean when it started, literally, if you have a child who has dry skin and eczema in the first 2 years of life, if they also have family histories, because there's a lot of other factors involved. If they have a sensitization pattern, meaning that specific things in the environment might trigger them, they also have a food allergy as well, then what we look at is over a period of time, and this is now hard data, if I can simplify it, is depending on the child, your risk could be almost 10 times higher than the child without the eczema to develop that allergic rhinitis. Some studies, so there's been studies in Canada, there's been a Tasmanian study where they looked at it was a longitudinal study, more than 3,000 patients. There were studies done all over the EU where they looked at, okay, here's all these kids with AD, right, with atopic dermatitis, and this is a pattern that they follow. What is their risk compared to the child without AD and the child without eczema? So essentially, when we look at that, in terms of the debate of the exact trajectory and the exact sequence might not be hard, but the risk factor, whether it's in the current time. So, some studies looked at your risk of allergic rhinitis at 4 years and 8 years. Some looked at your risk of allergic rhinitis and asthma later on into adulthood. There was one study that also looked at pre-adolescence, post-adolescence, and adult. And across the board, if you had eczema or atopic dermatitis when you were younger, if you were that kid who had it secondary to maybe something in the environment, or you also had what we call IgE sensitization, so you might have had some food allergy that maybe you grew out of, your risk of developing allergic rhinitis, irrespective of your epigenetics. So, epigenetics essentially looks at your background in terms of which environment you were born in. And that's why I mentioned some of the different parts of the world these studies happened in, because often our environment where we live, what we're exposed to does matter in terms of what our predisposition is. Our microbiome, as we know, matters in our skin, and our environment is impacted. And or does impact our microbiome. So some of the data literally looks at that, and then in terms of the way that it happens, and these are some of the theories, Suretha, is when you have your skin, you have your epidermis. If you already have a slightly inflamed epidermis, and now you either get an allergen or some infection. Like, we know things like staph are common. So all the mummies watching here know that if your child or you struggled with eczema, you might have at some point maybe had an infection. If you have allergens, food or environmental, penetrating through that skin, basically what that does at a very young age, it triggers off an immune response, which kind of skews it towards an allergic. We call that a type 2 skewing. Then that goes down to the lower layer, to our dermis. In our dermis, we get a whole bunch of other tiny little role players that are involved. These role players then cause a feedback. So it's almost like a loop back to your skin that now causes this to be an allergic dermatitis. And now, if you're exposed to a food or that environment, this now causes these mediators to be in your bloodstream, in your skin. And what the hypothesis is a lot of these mediators, because they're increased, they can enter your gut, They can enter your nasal passages, and they can enter your lungs as well. And just another thing to elaborate on that is, with the food allergy hypotheses, right? We all know now that if you have eczema, you're at higher risk of food allergy. And what has been proven, we call this the dual allergen hypothesis, is with foods, and this, what I just explained now, explains that very well. When you're a baby with a broken skin barrier, eczema, if you're not fed the foods first, if your skin, that inflamed skin, is first exposed to, for example, the peanut or the egg protein or the milk protein, you are more likely to be allergic compared to if you eat it. So essentially, in a nutshell, your skin is almost like an entry portal to promote sensitization to various
Mm.
things.
Mm. Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with you 100% with that. And I mean, I can just, think back, with my kids, when they have, and I'm sure that all the mommies with the eczema kids, they always start off with those red little cheeks. And then, and that's the skin is broken in those areas. So your brick wall is not intact, basically. So, I always like to say that your skin is like a sieve instead of a brick wall, then basically. So now you have baby taking banana and smearing it all over their faces when they eat, or a peanut sandwich, peanut butter sandwich, and they smear it all over their faces, basically. And that is not the way that we should be exposed to these allergens, so things that we can become allergic to. We should be exposed through our gut for the first time, like you said, and not through the skin. And that is why all of these allergy tests can sometimes be positive but not mean anything. Hey, so the two of us are also very strong advocates for not doing unnecessary tests and making sure that when you do have allergy tests, that you actually have it done by an expert that knows how to interpret it as well. So sorry, you wanted to
Yeah.
say?
Yeah, so I think that's again such an important point, Suretha. The allergy test extremely important. I see there's some questions coming in from mums, and both Dr. Kannenberg, Suretha, and I see all the time. Patients are, and it's almost because of what social media and the media has done to us. Traditionally, as human beings, when we have a problem, we want to blame something for it, whether it's medical or it's something else. We want to find a cause. And I feel like
Mhm.
food often gets blamed when it comes to whether it's a skin reaction, whether it's a snotty nose, whether it's issues in your chest as well. I get mummies every day, and I'm sure you hear this as well, Dr. Suretha, is I'm sure it's the milk. I'm very sure it's the dairy. Every time he eats dairy, this happens. And often when I get those mums, I immediately would ask the child, depending on the age, what's your favorite ice cream flavor? And when that child tells me, and I know they're not having sorbet and they've eaten ice cream and they're eating cheese and they're eating yogurt, that does not require a test. I already know from that your child's not allergic to cow's milk protein. It is not necessary to do a test for cow's milk protein. Let's rather now talk and let's find a proper cause. And all the mums and dads and all the patients who are listening, sometimes these tests can cause more harm than good. Like Dr. Suretha said, the interpretation of these tests is so important these days. We've now have a very advanced way of testing where we look at proteins. We don't just look at milk, we look at proteins, whether it's milk or wheat or egg. Those are the common allergens. And we now can tell which one is relevant and which one is not. So if you're one of those people who is worried about a food, see an expert and make sure that your test is properly interpreted, because you don't want to be that person who's avoiding things unnecessarily. It does so many things. Firstly, you're avoiding something unnecessarily. Secondly, you're avoiding it, which is difficult, and it's also not helping you, because if you're not allergic, it's not going to help your problem. Thirdly, if you're a kid and you're not going to eat these things, the negative impacts of that are nutritionally, you're going to be deficient. For milk, vitamin D and calcium is important. And also, you might develop a food allergy. Avoidance for a long period of time, you can create a food allergy instead of being tolerant to something. Nobody wants to live with a food allergy for the rest of their lives. Trust me, I treat patients with food allergy. It is a deadly diagnosis.
Hmm. expensive and deadly, isn't it? Because also the thing is that, like you said, your gut also has to get used to dealing with these foodstuffs. And if you're now avoiding these things for no reason at all, because this blood test showed that you were allergic to it, that actually then as you said, then your gut doesn't get used to it, and then you develop the food allergies. So it's better to actually really, if you're a very severe eczema case, then it is and especially if they're little babies, if before the age of 6 months, if they have a really bad eczema, if they have a really bad family history of eczema, then it is a good idea to see an allergist such as yourself, to make sure that you're on the right track. But all of this we've now discussed, and during this whole process, we've discussed the importance of the skin barrier and of the skin, keeping all the bad stuff out and the good stuff in. I always like to say it like that. And as I said, that usually our skin is supposed to be a brick wall, keeping the bad stuff out, good stuff in, good stuff obviously being water, and then bad stuff such as allergens, such as house dust mite and pollens and animal dander and things like that. And then keeping things like bacteria out or fungal infections out. But now your brick wall is like a sieve, and everything is going down into your skin, in the lower down. And because you have genetic, because we know that eczema is a genetic condition, you have a genetic predisposition to a very dry skin, which is then where we have the brick wall that's not intact. And then we have a genetic predisposition to this immune system that's already sitting there and being very hyperactive, looking for something to do. And we can talk about the hygiene hypothesis actually there as well, but because that's also a very interesting topic. But so what can we do really, and to really try and improve that? So the question really is, then can good eczema control make a difference later in life? And there's actually really good evidence, isn't it, Thulja, that you mentioned already, started mentioning there, that good eczema care early in life can actually make a big difference in the long run.
Yeah, so I think, when we explained how the allergens from outside enter a broken barrier, like Dr. Suretha mentioned, like how you mentioned so clearly, a few things about that skin barrier. Like you said, whenever I talk to patients, I always tell them our skin is an organ. It's the largest organ of the body, and it's our first defense against anything from the outside. Any infections, it's our first defense against, when we get hurt, we bruise, we cut, we bleed, all of that happens through our skin. So it's such an important organ. And obviously, you know that way more than me. But often that skin barrier is not given the attention that it should, right? So when
Yeah.
it comes to the allergens penetrating that top layer, that epidermis, when they enter through that epidermis, because it can increase the risk of all of these allergies, meaning your sensitization. So we spoke about the food, but now let's say things like dust mite, things like pollen, things like dogs and cats. Talking now, just branching off there with the hygiene hypothesis, the exposure to dogs and cats is great. We never tell people to not be exposed to these things. Farm life is healthy. We don't want to keep kids in a bubble. But when they're having a broken skin barrier and a genetic predisposition, now those things go in. And if you're constantly now reacting and you're constantly being exposed to something like dust mite or maybe grass pollen, which irrespective of where you live in Africa, you're going to be inhaling. That then is going to still affect your skin because you already now are showing a sensitization there. But sensitization doesn't only mean skin, it means your immune system's reacting. And if your immune system is reacting, it means when it enters your eyes, you're going to itch and rub. It's going to enter your nose, you're going to itch, you're going to get swollen inside. And then when that eventually enters your airways, your nose and lungs, and that's, another topic on its own, we call it the one airway from our nose to our lungs. That's going to cause inflammation. So maybe some mucus, maybe some itching, maybe some swelling and inflammation as well. Sarita, I often have patients who present with eczema, and we both see them. They come to us because the skin is so visible. So everyone sees the problem on the skin, they see the inflammation. And when I examine them and I start asking them questions, or sometimes I would ask them a question about nose symptoms or chest symptoms, and they would often say, no, actually, I haven't noticed it. But while they're chatting to me and while they're speaking, I can tell that they talking and trying to catch a breath, and I can
Mm,
immediately see this person does not have a really good airway function. Or sometimes while they're chatting to me and they've presented only for eczema, but they're constantly doing this, or they're
mm,
constantly doing this. And then you can tell immediately that this person's now got this whole type 2 picture. They've got the itchy eyes, the itchy swollen nose, they've got dry lips, so they're breathing with their mouths as well. And then eventually, when you do their lung function, and right at the end, the patient will say, you know, you're quite right, actually. My wife kicked me, and these are real examples. My wife kicked me out of the room because I snore too much. And she says I keep waking up at night to cough all the time. I never knew it was a problem before because I just lived with it.
yeah, yeah. No, I must say that this is all actually we're getting so many amazing questions here that I think we're going to have to give a little bit more time to questions at the end, more than we had planned actually. And I see that Eva is also there. Hi, Eva. It's lovely to see you this evening. She's one of our advocates, so our atopic dermatitis advocates. So lovely to see you as well. So yes, so what mistakes I often find that parents commonly make with treating eczema, what one of the things that I unfortunately often find is, and I guess that's, we're all very busy, but the one problem that I find is that people aren't applying enough of the right moisturizers. And the right moisturizer doesn't mean it has to be a super expensive moisturizer. It just needs to be a moisturizer that doesn't have preservatives or doesn't have perfumes and colorants in. So those are the things that we have to look out for. And so sometimes it's worthwhile just making sure that you even if you just have to visit a dermatologist once or an allergist once, just to get all of the just the I always like to say the basics, because we have two problems. We have the dry skin issue, we have the inflammation issue. When we look at the dry skin issue, we do the good stuff, or first of all, we stay away from the bad stuff and we do the good stuff. And the bad stuff are obviously soaps that foam. That's one of the really bad things that I often see, unfortunately. Maybe a little bubble bath. Oh, and babies like to be in the bath. I know that. Kids like to be in the bath, because then you know that they are at least in one place, and you know that they're not causing havoc elsewhere in the house. But the thing is that a short, quick bath is what is really what we're at, not what we're advising, is what the all the evidence and all the recommendations all across the world is advising. So it's very important, because water is bad for your skin. Actually, people always they get freak out a little bit when I say that, because water is bad for your skin. But if we look at what is good for the skin, then that's where we're going to do the moisturizer. We actually want to get 4 times a day. Now, I know that's difficult. So, a child that goes to school, maybe we can do before school, we can maybe do after school, and then we can do in the evening. As much as it is possible. And even when the skin gets better, then you can just decrease it a bit, and you can go to twice a day instead of 3 times a day. So, I often tell them that when you start to see that your skin is not good and it's starting to get to a flare, then increase your moisturizer first of all. And if that's not enough, then you start to add medication that will target the inflammation specifically. And that's where we do things like topical steroids or calcineurin inhibitors, or topical products that we use as well. But we also know that the dry skin problem keeps the inflammation going, and the inflammation keeps the dry skin problem going. So if we're not going to address the dryness, then we can never get on top of the inflammation. So there's no point applying a whole lot of cortisones to your skin, cortisone creams and things to your skin, if you're going to be washing with soap that foams and going to be sitting in the bath, bubble bath, washing your hair in the bath with a normal shampoo. Those are the type of things. And also, we, as you said earlier, and I find I'm very passionate about this, I always tell patients is that, you cannot live, you don't want to live in a bubble. We want our children to have normal lives. We want our eczema kids to have normal lives. So as normal as possible. So we need to be aggressive with the basic things, which is actually a critical part of the treatment. Yeah, so that is, I don't know if you have anything to add there.
Just to add to that also, all amazingly important points is sometimes patients haven't done that. Just cut out the nasties. Exactly as Dr. Suretha said, we don't advocate a specific brand. Different brands and different products work for different people. And I say to patients, whatever works for you, so long as I know it doesn't have chemicals in it, it doesn't have fragrance, it's not water-based, it's fat-based. Remember that epidermis and that skin barrier is like a lipid barrier. So when I examine patients, I don't just look, I feel. I run my hands through their skin because sometimes their skin looks fine, but when you feel it, you can actually feel the roughness and the leatheriness, or sometimes you can feel the slight irritation, literally because they were scratching in that area. And that's where that lipid barrier can sometimes, because it's not smooth, and lipid barrier is supposed to be smooth. It's the lipid and the fat that gives it the smoothness. Those are the areas where the allergens are going to penetrate, and it's going to cause this vicious cycle of ongoing inflammation. And, I love what you said about the water and the bath. Also, important for patients to know, with all of this stuff, we're bombarded with information. We need to look at the information critically. There's a lot of natural products. Natural doesn't mean better, right? It needs to be medically, dermatologically tested. So, from my perspective as an allergist who treats these allergies in patients who might have eczema and also asthma or allergic rhinitis, the number of patients who've been sold pollen-based creams and topicals, like, so something with some pollen, lavender or tea tree or aloe vera. Remember, guys, these are plants. If you have allergies, we're allergic to plants, and we're already laying the foundation of eczema being a break in your skin barrier. You now are, if in fact what you've been sold is a real plant, if it's in fact natural, you're basically rubbing your skin with some product that you might be allergic to. So whatever product you choose, I tell patients, if you can smell it, you should not be using it. Anything. I know there are brands where it says baby or it says sensitive, but if you can smell anything, you shouldn't be using.
Mm.
And
And
often
isn't it
looking, yeah.
Yeah. And isn't it absolutely fascinating? I know we have to move on, but I always find it absolutely fascinating. It's such a human thing to do because I also do it and I'm a dermatologist, I should know better. But when you try a new cream, then I know that it's specifically for eczema and it's not, if it smells of anything, then it's bad. But you apply it and you always smell it. And the patients also apply it and they smell it. Obviously, they don't want to apply stinky stuff. But the thing is, and some of these products do not smell that great. But please be careful with botanicals, ladies and gentlemen, and mommies and daddies. Be careful with botanicals because we often get that. And interestingly, we also sometimes get people who, even if they're sensitized to specific plants, even if they drink herbal teas, then it can actually come out in the skin. So that's an interesting one, I always think.
And food products. I had to mention that, right? Any product on the skin, it's not as big in South Africa as it is overseas. It's a big thing in the EU and USA, but people being sold products with foods in them. So there are skin products that are made. Remember, if we go back to, and if you missed it, the part where I explained to you how food allergies are formed via our skin, don't ever apply any cream, any moisturizer, any product onto your skin that's made of any food.
Yeah. And now we also have these sheep fat and beef fat things that's also coming in now, hey? So strange things that are happening in this world now. But anyway, so thank you, Tilda. That was we can chat like for hours. And we will, at a meeting that we will be holding, and we will definitely advertise it around, it will be the 19th of September, but it'll be in person for those who are in Cape Town. But we'll tell you about that. So first of all, let me just take a moment to thank our sponsor, Dermastore, for their valued support of tonight's AFSA Live event, and their partnership helps us continue providing trusted allergy education and support to families across South Africa. So let's take a moment to have a look at this fantastic video that I've already seen.
For those who may not yet know Dermastore, today's headline sponsor, it is one of South Africa's most trusted destinations for dermatologist-curated skincare, supplements and hair care. Dermastore brings together many of the evidence-based brands that dermatologists and other healthcare professionals know, trust and recommend to their patients. Customers also have access to expert guidance from qualified skin therapists via live chat, helping them choose products suited to their individual needs. Visit dermastore.co.za to discover more.
Hello, back everyone. It's so lovely to be with you. And we're still here with Dr. Thulja Trikamjee, both of us in the lovely Cape Town. Blessed to be in the lovely Cape Town. So let's move on to something that it can be very scary. And really parents really need to know it can be really dangerous. This is something that you can die of, actually. So a really bad asthma attack is something that you can die of, but early signs will obviously be useful, to know about. So things like that you mentioned earlier, that it always goes to the chest, that they cough at night, those type of things. Dr. Thulja, maybe what are the early warning signs of asthma that parents can look out for to address earlier rather than later?
So I think since we're making reference to the allergy or the atopic march, is if you have, firstly, be at high alert. If you have a family history of asthma, if you have a family history of eczema, if your child had bad eczema, if it started earlier on, if it was severe, if it was difficult to get under control, we're almost kind of already expecting these kind of symptoms. And then if your child is snoring at night, your child is constantly rubbing their nose and eyes, we already know the airway is affected. And often when I know kids are now going to creche, if the moms say to me, oh, they've got sick twice a year, then that's okay. But when moms say to me, they've gotten sick a few times, and each time they got sick, it went down to their chest. They needed antibiotics, they needed oral steroids, they needed to stay home for a long period of time. This is now telling us that inflammation, which we see on the skin, that inflammation is from the nose going down to the chest as well. Now, this is something that I want to tell mothers. Mothers often, and this is just how we all are. I'm terrible with my medication. I'm always shouting at my patients about not taking their medication, but I myself am awful. If I go away on a 1 day or 2 day trip, I forget my own meds, right? But moms always want to try to do things as natural as possible and don't want to give medication, right? But what we want to do when we treat a lot of these younger kids is want to be very preventative. We started with the atopic march, which means that we know that if your child is getting sick all the time and they're getting wheezy and sneezy all the time, that they are at higher risk of asthma. Asthma, like you mentioned, Dr. Suretha, can kill. Asthma mortality is a big problem all around the world, in developed countries, but also especially in developing countries such as ours. So when kids are younger, we want to do everything we can to prevent it. So what we would often do in that kind of kid is manage their airway symptoms for every day better, so that this all the sneezing, constant coughing. So moms might say that, or sometimes the moms don't even know. I'll ask the sibling, does your brother wake up in the middle of the night to cough? Do you get woken up and do you get disturbed? How badly does he snore? Because a patient traditionally will tell you, no, I do not snore, because they're fast asleep and they don't know. But the other person will report that they snore. Or they might say, or their friends in class have been saying to them, you always cough in the class and you disturb everybody. Or their friends in class might tell them, or their teacher might have commented, this child is always sick. They're always getting breathless. Sometimes, and these are simple things for moms, often I would ask a mom, does he Does he get breathless or does he cough when he's running and playing? And traditionally, a mom would say, oh my goodness, everybody thinks their kid is the naughtiest kid. You know, my child's always running, hyperactive, doesn't sit still. He never ever gets tired. I don't notice it. But then I would ask the kid, you know, when you guys are doing athletics at school, do you feel that all your friends can run faster than you? When you're playing soccer on that grass, do you feel like you're the first person to get tired? Have you ever had to sit down to catch your breath because you couldn't go on any longer? And those are now subtle signs that what started as maybe a skin issue or a family history of all of these conditions is now presenting with mild exertional, either in the form of during infections with the wheezing and the chestiness, or in exercise and in exertion. So these are all subtle, small signs. And, you know, again, what I say to patients is the proof is in the pudding. When we manage these patients better, if you find the sleep gets better, the performance in sports gets better,
Mhm.
there's even research that your performance in class gets better from breathing with a more clear nose, from not itching all the time on your skin while the teacher is talking. This then is proof to you that, you know what we're doing with medicating for these conditions is we now preventing progression. The important key with the atopic march is not just the diseases. The important thing there is progression, meaning that it can get worse over a period of time. And just, you know, the last thing I want to say about that is, you know, you mentioned that we did a lecture yesterday on the atopic march, and this was a new diagram I saw when I was doing research for this. There's a little stepwise diagram, a red diagram of a kid, and it just has a little baby climbing these steps. And it says wheeze one, wheeze two, wheeze three, wheeze four. So every time your child wheezes and gets chesty, every time there's that bronchiolitis where you need to nebulize, you need to give cortisone, all of those times, if we don't nip it in the bud and we don't
Mm.
treat it, that is increased risk of asthma. And it's not just for their adolescent life, it's throughout their life.
Exactly. And what you actually mentioned now is very interesting because we have a question here. So I know it's not time for Q&A. We will get to that now soon. But there was a lady here who mentioned that she started off with asthma and now she has emphysema. So that is the typical issue, you know, or chronic bronchitis, emphysema that you can develop. That's not even non-smokers can get that. And that is because their asthma is not controlled properly. And there are so many treatments that one can use for asthma. So really, it is an absolute it's an absolute travesty if people don't get proper asthma treatment. Yeah. So what is the one piece of advice I think that I'd like to take this one if you don't mind. So what's the one piece of advice that I would like to give patients of a child or parents of a child with eczema? So for me is the one thing is that it is a chronic condition, that it comes and goes, that it's sometimes they're really lucky and it comes and goes. Sometimes they outgrow it. We can never make these promises, unfortunately, when we see the kids. But we do hope that they outgrow it. But even then, they can still have recurrences at a later stage of life when they have eyelids involved, when they have hands involved, for example. So that's the one thing that, well, I'm actually two pieces of advice because let's look after the skin barrier. Oh, and the third thing is if someone tells you, and there I'm going to, what happens often is I prescribe topical steroids to my patients, and then the pharmacist tells them that they shouldn't use it. And so I often tell them, please, just trust me, and we'll get through this. But also, oh, and the fourth one, sorry, I'm just being, so don't use steroids forever. We want to use steroids when it's needed, and topical steroids when it's needed, and even on a little baby skin, we use the correct steroids, because uncontrolled eczema is just as bad as the problems that we can get with topical steroids. So you really need to find a doctor that you trust and that has the knowledge on this particular condition. So, and there are many around, and many of the names you can find on the Allergy Foundation of South Africa's website. What's the biggest myth about eczema and asthma, Dr. Thulja?
I think we touched on that, Suretha, and I'm sure you see this, and maybe you have some insights as well, but that food is causing all my problems. So,
Oh,
yes,
yes.
yes, food allergy is a very legitimate thing. And we here at the Allergy Foundation of South Africa take food allergy incredibly seriously, very, very seriously. But we also know that because food allergy is a serious diagnosis, very much like asthma, people can die of a food allergy. We're very passionate about making sure that if you do have a food allergy, you know about it, you're educated, and you're properly diagnosed and properly managed. You have your emergency care to protect you at all times. But if you don't have a food allergy, the proper management, the proper education, and the proper advice is also crucial. I had a patient who said to me one day who has such a severe peanut allergy that he could die. He said to me, he says, doctor, with everywhere I go in South Africa, everybody's saying, I'm allergic, I'm allergic, I'm allergic. He cried. He says it illegitimizes my problem because he
Mm,
could actually die. And today I saw a chef actually from a restaurant, and we had a discussion about it. And I said to him, I said, from a restaurant and a chef's point of view, if you constantly have so many patients saying you are allergic to foods, using that word or that terminology, and they don't react, it makes the industry, it makes airplanes, and we've had a death recently in the last month on an
mm,
international airline. It
mhm,
makes airplanes, it makes restaurants, and it makes schools more complacent because when they make accidents and they're not so strict with avoidance, nothing happens. So then that one day you have that one patient. So please, if you feel that your eczema might be impacted by milk or wheat, make sure you see a proper doctor, get a proper diagnosis. Don't just go out and do panel tests. Don't just go out and do random testing. Don't go to any unvalidated. It's only a confirmed medical lab that can do a food allergy test. Don't listen to anybody who might tell you to cut out many, many different things. It's not going to impact your eczema or your asthma. Either you are allergic or you are not allergic. And trust me, to everybody who's worried about a food, knowing whether you're allergic or not, or being able to eat everything freely can have a massive impact on your quality of life.
mm. Yeah,
I don't know if
no,
you see that as
absolutely.
well, Surita. Tons of people cutting out a whole bunch of foods.
Yeah, I do. And then it's, I mean, gluten free. I tried to do that for my mom, because she's convinced that she had that. Gluten and lactose. And here I was trying to bake her rusks, and you have to get, I don't know, almond flour, and it costs a fortune, and it's rock hard as well when you bake it. So it's no, it's thankfully, you get sometimes you can just give them some probiotics or something, and then they suddenly believe they're fine. So that's how I managed to
And
fix
you
my
touched
mom's
on such an
problems.
important thing, two important things, Sarita, the mental health aspect, because patients who, and everyone who's listening to this, who has eczema or has a family member, and you and I talk about this every day with our patient, knows there's a huge emotional component to this. This controls your entire life. It controls when you go out, who you see, it controls the clothes
Mm,
you wear, it controls which environments you put yourself in, it controls which restaurants you eat in. If you also then are taking away a whole bunch of foods without properly assessing, and if you're not allergic to these foods, this on top of that, and I've seen it really does impact your life. So I've seen a few patients where I told them without a test, you are not allergic to these things. And I had people crying tears saying to me, you mean I can actually drink coffee with milk again? Like that has just changed my life. Someone just telling me that. Or do you think that my child can actually eat ice cream again? So those tiny
oh,
things, you're already dealing with a component of your life that is impacting you mentally and socially. The food impacts you further. So it's so important.
mm,
And that you touched on the cost. Everyone cannot
mm,
afford to be allergic to food. It's an expensive disease to have.
yeah, exactly. And it actually adds about half an hour to your shopping, I'm told. So that's, and time is also money, isn't it? So we have to look at that, all of that as well. So what gives you hope for families living with allergic diseases today?
I think we know more now about allergic diseases than we ever did. And I'm very excited that we're going to know more in the future. You know, both you and I practice, and I think it's the future of medicine. And we've done another live talking about this, but something which we call precision medicine. And precision medicine basically means that, you know, we don't just want to treat conditions at the surface. We really want to understand conditions right down to the bottom of every cell, right down to the cellular level. And I think, you know, what I would love to arm patients with this hope. I want patients to know there's light at the end of the tunnel, not because we can wave a magic wand and make you better, not because after one consultation, here you are, your eczema is better, but because we
Mm,
understand it so in depth now, we research it so much. It's not just a skin disease only anymore. We really want to manage you holistically. We appreciate and we know about the mental aspect, but we want to make your entire quality of life better. And we now do have drugs, better drugs that can potentially, if you're really struggling with incredibly bad eczema or atopic dermatitis, really bad asthma, you have really bad situation in your family where multiple people are struggling, you're allergic to many things, you can't live in a bubble, as you said, Suretha, and you don't have to avoid everything all of the time. You know, we really tease out what are your risks for each condition, how can we manage each condition separately? How can we best improve your life? How can we best
mm.
reduce your risk, reduce your severity? And if need be, try to, you know, either desensitize you if you're highly allergic to something, or go into precision medicine or what we call biologics. But like I said, you and I can
Mm.
talk about that in another life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's actually, now that that you're talking about biologics, the first, I think we can move on to the Q&A now. But what I also just want to say from my side also is that there's so much research ongoing on atopic dermatitis at long last. So many new medications, not all of them, we don't have all of them in South Africa. We have only two, maybe one that we can use off label, special ones that we can use in South Africa, specifically for eczema. That's referring to that. Obviously, for asthma, we have many others, but there's a lot of research ongoing, and that really warms my heart because that means that we're getting that eczema is actually, people are paying attention to it, and that is really what warms my heart. But if we look here at the very first question that we actually had at 7 minutes past 7, so that was in the very, very beginning. The young lady said that I think it's, can we get Depixent in South Africa? It's my last hope. And yes, Depixent is actually available in South Africa. Unfortunately, it costs a fortune. But some medical aids here and there do cover it. We know that it is, eczema is not a PMB for a medical aid, unfortunately. But eczema is a PMB, and sometimes a pulmonologist or a lung specialist or an allergist, if the patient's asthma is really bad, then they can push the medical aid a little bit in that regard. With eczema, there are some medical aids that are open to it. The more kind of closed medical aids, this very complicated story, is more open to it actually. But the bigger medical aids, generally, they are not really open to it. But Dr. Thulja has quite a few patients on Dupixent, and it is a fantastic medication, specifically actually targeting all of these T helper 2 or these type 2 inflammation diseases. And it really is my one wish. Hopefully, one day we'll get a generic that people can afford. And so that, and that it's covered by the government, even, in public hospitals. That'd be my one big dream one day. hopefully before I die. So yeah. But yeah, I don't know if you have anything to add about Dupixent.
No, I think that was perfect.
Nothing
You
there.
covered it perfect.
So,
Yeah.
what's the biggest myth about eczema and asthma? I think we've already kind of spoken about that, isn't it? Can kids outgrow asthma?
So remember it with asthma, what we're talking about today is the cause, right? So depending on what a lot of people go through with this allergic march is they would get all of these conditions, the eczema, maybe food, allergic rhinitis and asthma. And then after the asthma, a lot of kids as they grow would say, adults say to me, I had asthma when I was a child and I outgrew it. So the answer to it is I don't like to call it asthma when they're younger. I manage them as such, but that does get outgrown. But remember, when we're referring to this type 2 inflammation, if you're allergic maybe to pollen or to dust mite or something in the environment, that actual allergy you haven't outgrown, that is still there. So often somebody would say in adulthood, when I was 20 or 30 years old, I suddenly started coughing again, or my nose started getting blocked again. Or when I moved from Gauteng to the Western Cape, or from the Western Cape to Grahamstown, today I had a patient, then my eczema started playing up again. So yes, I wouldn't say it completely goes away, but you would go through periods where you don't have to use any reliever or rescue medication, and then you wouldn't need to use any controller, but then there might be periods where it might come back again.
Mm, mm. And then
I
we have two questions here actually on itching. So how do you stop the itch? I'm going crazy with it. And that is one of the big problems that we have with eczema, unfortunately. In this particular patient, Claudine has she has eczema, she has asthma, and she has allergic rhinitis. So she has the full house. But then last year she had a kidney failure as well. That's now complicated matters because we can actually itch only from kidney failure. You don't even have to have the whole eczema background to have the itch. We have eczema that is in itself causing the itch, but then we also have, on the other hand, we actually have kidney failure. So this is someone that must definitely get to a dermatologist and or an allergologist, and someone that really needs, because really, itching is unfortunately, I've seen terrible videos of people even hitting themselves in their sleep because they cannot because they're itching so much. Children wake up to 30 times a night because they can't sleep. So it really is it impacts quality of life dramatically.
Yeah.
um yeah, and then there's also here a question from Eva that says that she read an article that it's actually the itch that drives the eczema development. Yes, and we call it the itch that rashes, isn't it? So the hypersensitivity of the itch neurons, and that the immune response is secondary to this. Is this true? This is complicated because indeed, yes, we do have the itch that usually starts off first, but there's already a lot of barrier dysfunction and inflammation going on there already. And then what happens is they itch, then you start to scratch. The more you scratch, the worse the itch gets. And those, I always tell patients, I like to tell them that this, the more you're going to practice something. So if you're a bodybuilder and you're going to practice something, then you get stronger. So what happens is the more you itch and the more you scratch, and the more these nerves are stimulated, the stronger they get and the more sensitive they get. And in the end, what happens is if wind blows over your skin, then you itch. Just, not even normal. I mean, you don't even have to be scratched by wool or anything. It's just simple little things will make you itch. So yes, you are definitely going to be more prone to it. And there are actually certain medications that specifically address that we don't have in South Africa, unfortunately. And apparently we're not going to get it in South Africa. But it is something, it definitely, the itch in itself is actually part of the whole process.
So just to add to that as well to these patients is, remember, I think it's important, especially Claudine, because you've also got allergic rhinitis and asthma. And, as allergists, we manage them all together. We manage your immune system. So in managing your allergic rhinitis properly and managing your asthma properly, you're actually managing and you're helping your eczema. So if you haven't, right, even with the second patient, finding out, sometimes I don't even do blood tests for patients, just a good history. I have patients who will say to me, I itch every time I go stay at that B&B and sleep in that old bed. Now, that patient is telling you without a blood test that I'm allergic to dust mite, and potentially that could be causing everything, my allergic rhinitis, my asthma, and my eczema. And managing that could completely as a whole, or managing that dust mite allergy now can impact everything altogether. So in these type of patients, for you guys, it's important to get not a food allergy test done, but important to see somebody, and you can contact the Allergy Foundation. I am happy to see patients like you, so that you can get down to what's causing all the problems, not only the eczema, and manage it all together.
Interesting question here. Is there a way to have injections for multiple allergy reactions like food, medicines, dust, cat and dog hair, etc.? Obviously, that's completely out of my field, Thulja, but that's
Yeah.
something that you could maybe answer for us.
So the answer to that, if a combined injection, the answer is no. But
Mm.
when you're talking about injections for environmental things like dust mite, cats, dogs, grass, these are common things that trigger, and that's what I was talking about, with the allergic march. So those things would trigger your skin, your nose, your chest, your eyes, and everything. So for those things, some important things we can desensitize. It either comes in the form of drops in your mouth, or you can get injections for those. Usually, we do those injections separately. So, dust mite will be on its own. It's a 3-year process. Sometimes cat and dog and dust mite can be done together, and then your pollens are done together. So, it's not one injection for them all. You usually want to kind of imagine it's like a vaccine. You're training your immune system to be now more tolerant and have more antibodies. I tell patients you're building up soldiers again, so you stop reacting to these things over and over and over again. And then with foods, no, there's no actual injection for foods, though. Dr. Suretha mentioned the Dupixent. There's now research in the realm of type 2 inflammation, because Dupixent treats type 2 inflammation. So Dupixent is FDA approved for asthma, for atopic dermatitis, for nasal polyps. It's being used for allergic rhinitis in the EU. And there's now research looking at if a patient has a peanut allergy, when we give them Dupixent for all of their allergies, what does it do to their peanut allergy? And there is data to suggest that because you're treating this patient as a whole and all of their immune mechanism, that whole atopic march, that you're not curing that allergy, but you are helping these allergies. So those are the
Mm.
injections that we have available.
Mhm. There are fantastic questions that I wish we had time to get to, but you don't have to worry. The questions that we have not gotten to will be addressed. And I am very excited to address the dermatology questions there that I see about cortisones and why it comes back when you stop using it. But I have been told that we really need to say goodbye because everyone wants to go to sleep. And yes, so Thulja, over to you to just do our closure.
Yes, so thank you. Thank you to everyone for joining, to Dermastore especially. Thank you for sponsoring tonight's live event. I'm sure we've made a difference to many people's lives, judging from the questions that we have. This was much needed, and hopefully, if it's helped one person, this is good enough for me and Dr. Suretha. That's why we're here. Thank you to everyone who submitted questions. We are going to try to answer them to the best of our ability. I know there are many people who want to find out if they are among the 2 lucky winners. So for this, please visit the Allergy Foundation website, where you can find more information about other conditions. You can share tonight's live link. You can review tonight's entire live, and you will already also find the 2 lucky winners that are posted here. And please, if you have any information that you need, please remember to go to our AFSA website. It's full of latest articles, literature, easy to understand information, videos, and information about all of the ongoing events that AFSA is continuously hosting. It's all for you, for all our patients.
Yes, thank you. And it was absolutely lovely. I want to say having a visit with you again tonight and chatting with you again, and we will definitely have you back on again. And I think we form a formidable team. You teach me a lot. I think you teach me more than I would teach you. But I really enjoy. I really learn a lot when we have our chats and our meetings together. So, yes, everyone, thanks so much for joining us. I will just also say goodbye from my side. And I hope you have a lovely evening. And just, keep an eye on social media and on Allergy Foundation of South Africa's website for our next meeting. And have a good evening.